I'm Anna Gavanas. I'm a social anthropologist originally from Stockholm University, and I've co-written some books about DJ culture and electronic dance music history in the Swedish context, and also co-edited DJ Culture in the Mix with Ben Attias. Hi, Ben.
Hi, my name is Johan Jansson. I am an associate professor in human geography, working at the Department of Social and Economic Geography at the University of Uppsala in Sweden. I've been working with doing research on the creative industries, and recently published a paper on surviving record stores, focusing on vinyl records and stuff like that. Let's start with the presentation. Okay, imagine yourself in a club. The time is getting late, and the DJ has slowly increased the intensity of the music. The dance floor moves seemingly synchronously. Suddenly, the floor explodes when the DJ is putting on what is right there and right now, the best song in the world. Then imagine the next day when you join a family dinner and play the same song to your entire family. You are desperately trying to explain the greatness of this particular song, but the looks you get are incomprehensible, and your grandpa screams, "Turn it off." So, what makes a song a hit, and why does some songs make sense in one context but seemingly completely uninteresting in another? The path from idea to finished song and product to your choice of music is a crooked path, with a range of different actors influencing the choices you make. The explanations can be found in relation to who presents this and where. In other words, we need to understand the context in which the song is presented, and at the same time understand the song in its context. The empirical material we present today builds on insights from two specific periods in the history of electronic dance music in Stockholm, Sweden, including the national and international channels through which this musical and cultural expression came to be established. It utilizes longitudinal and historical perspectives on the first two waves of electronic dance music, disco and rave in Stockholm, and Sweden first presented in Anna's book, From Disco Fever to Rave Hysteria, although it's only available in Swedish, and it's from 2020. To understand the processes behind why people choose a particular song or product, we are taking our starting point in the concept of curation. Curation is a concept taken from the art world, but it's a concept that has come to be used in many other contexts beyond the art world. The word curate is derived from the Latin verb curare, which means taking care, and is traditionally associated with art and museum collections. Over time, the role of curators has shifted from preserving and archiving to selecting, evaluating, displaying, and framing pieces. Recently, the concept has also been extended and applied to curators in other fields such as fashion, food, craft, and music. This paper aims to understand how electronic dance music has been implemented in Sweden and established as a culture and also a subculture phenomenon. More specifically, to understand the curatorial processes behind this. In our work, we have identified three relevant key processes. Translocality is a concept that describes how different phenomena are spread across multiple sites and in networks, and how different sites are linked thanks to these networks. This concept rejects the strict division between local, regional, and global scales, and instead looks at how things happen locally, also affects and are influenced by similar processes and phenomena in other places. Thus, translocality could be defined as being identified with more than one location. Our empirical material supports the idea that specific individuals act as pioneers and early adopters of new music and ideas. These individuals constitute nodes in international and national flows that introduce music and organizational ideas from other places, in this case mainly from the UK and the US, and in translating different aspects of disco and rave to national local circumstances and regulatory frameworks. Although rarely emphasized in the literature, cultural activities in general and the culture and creative industries are dependent on the supply of appropriate and low-cost spaces, facilitating social embedded processes of creativity and valuation. From the sparse literature in the field, we know that some urban spaces and places are better equipped to host cultural production and creativity than others. Dancing and dance cultures, and even more specifically club culture, are territorial phenomena in such way that they are, to use the word of Sarah Thornton, persistently associated with specific space, which is both continually transforming its sounds and styles and regularly bearing witness to the apogees and excess of youth culture. The introduction of new ideas and cultural expression does not come without resistance. In this case, arguably, the resistance takes two forms, both of importance to the contextualization and development of electronic dance music. The first is top-down, institutionalized resistance by forces in industry and policy. The second is the grassroots resistance to this institutionalized power and established cultural norms of mainstream society through club cultures.
Our paper illuminates people who have contributed to translocal flows and pioneered Stockholm's dance music scenes. By selecting, introducing, and translating dance music and styles, they have brought disco, house music, and rave from cities like Paris, New York, and London to Stockholm. On the first picture here, you see Eva Karlsson. During the pre-disco music era of the 1960s, upper middle-class pioneers like Eva Karlsson and her friend Annette Hedlund went from Stockholm to France, visited discotheques like La Gorille in Nice and Whiskey A Go-Go in Paris, and brought back French and Italian records in their suitcases. And they also had alternative sources for inspiration, like international radio channels and printed magazines and imported records. Eva Karlsson introduced this music that she collected during her trips to discotheques for youth in Stockholm, like her club she created in 1962 called Scotch Club. On the second picture, you see Jan Palm. Also in the domestic Swedish context, knowledge and organizational skills about dance music culture were reinterpreted and diffused through pioneering individuals, where it spread between suburbs and city centers, as well as between different cities in Sweden. And one such pioneer was Jan Palm, who was a DJ and promoter in Stockholm in the 1970s and 80s. He lived in the Stockholm suburb, Tensta, where he first discovered disco through the multilingual commercial broadcaster Radio Luxembourg. He brought records from import shops in the city center and started off playing at suburban youth recreation centers and later on in the city. And another example of these pioneers is Claes Hedberg on the third picture there with a member of the Village People. From the late 1960s and onwards, DJ and club promoter Claes Hedberg worked on various ships between the UK and the Swedish west coast. In addition, Claes' uncle was an airline pilot who brought records from the US, which had not yet been released in Sweden. Claes also gained interest and knowledge when visiting Studio 54 in New York, and then was DJing at nightclubs in Stockholm and elsewhere in Sweden. And from his travels, contacts with records labels and import shop, Claes had access to records, and in the late 1960s and the 70s and early 80s, he also ran Swedish national organizations for DJs, organized national meetings for DJs, and promote disco music nationally at discotheques. And on the fourth picture, you see Ullis Rengholt. After disco faded in the 1980s and mutated into house music, Swedish DJs and promoters who traveled to the UK in the late 1980s tapped into the musical and cultural flows when acid house parties transformed into rave parties in warehouses and outdoor spaces, and during the second summer of love in 1988. For instance, Ullis, she also lived in Paris and London in the 1980s. And when she returned to Sweden, she was influenced by early house, techno, and international club life, and ran a number of clubs in Stockholm throughout the 1990s, like the ladies' club Girls Go Go Go, which was inspired by Whiskey A Go Go in London.
In this paper, we identify 3 actors or processes that in different ways filter, sort, and contextualize the music and the cultural expressions established in Stockholm during the study period and in relation to the development of disco and rave cultures. First, people. Ideas and products travel, and they are diffused through individuals. The empirical examples show that specific pioneers were responsible for not only bringing influences and ideas from abroad, but also to physically bring the records. Second, spaces. And in our paper, we highlight the importance of appropriate and low-cost spaces for establishing musical genres and cultural expressions. It's shown that that both public infrastructure in the form of municipal and state-financed premises, as well as various private initiatives, constitute spaces in which both disco and rave have been able to develop. Third, resistance. On the one hand, resistance from mainstream society, for example, discrimination and racism, but also policy and regulations may have hindered the introduction of electronic dance music. On the other hand, the resistance against these regulations and attitudes have functioned as a cohesive force for these emerging subculture movements. Not least, resistance may itself constitute an important contextualization in such a way that it creates identities consisting of clearly defined us and an easily identified opposition, the other. Finally, this presentation is based on a chapter that me and Anna published in a book released about a month ago in August. The book is a coded volume with 9 chapters dealing with various aspects of activities in the interaction between culture and economy. More specifically, the book highlights characteristic tensions within these sectors. The tension, for example, between individual and collaborative creative practices, the tension between tradition and innovation, and the tension between isolated and interconnected spaces of creativity. In relation to these tensions, our paper highlights both individual efforts and social embedded processes of valuation, as well as the importance of interconnected translocal networks of locally developed subculture expressions. That was it.
Thank you.
A big thank you.
Thanks, Johan, Anna. So how long was the book in making? You've been working on the book for a while?
I think we worked for it during 3 years or something, like a really long time.
It's based. It's a network of people, and we had a number of workshops and colloquiums for I think 8 years or something. And the idea was always to be very informal with this and not to have some tangible outputs. But on the very last of these conferences, we decided that we should actually have some tangible output. And this conference took place in, 2 years, October 2019. But due to the pandemic, it took 2 years to actually be on the desk. So.
Yeah, I imagine. It's a big undertaking, especially with multiple authors in the same book. Are there any questions from chat? I can see lots of people giving you kudos, liking the presentation. I see Ben.
Can I just say that Ben Attias and Tobias, his friend Tobias Planten or something it's called, they play at the Raid Fest 8 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow, I think, where they will also play some tracks from an upcoming Nomads in Sound compilation that was first presented 10 years ago, the first edition. Now it's the 4th edition that they're going to play. It's a collaboration between, because I also work as a producer and DJ, and me and some friends globally have put together this compilation that will be featured at the Raid Fest. So look for it. It's in the
is it the link that Johan's posted?
Yeah,
Okay.
it will be released on November 11th, and Ben will play it at the Raid Fest.
Excellent.